I believe everybody has a wound or two or three, but most people have a wound that defines them. And I think sometimes that wound becomes our purpose. And you think about Jesus and the woman at the well, or the rough fishermen that turned when they met Jesus. They all had wounds. And Jesus came in and helped heal those wounds. And for me, the wound, sometimes I think the wound for many people becomes a catalyst for purpose.
Jon, thanks for joining us today. I think it's always helpful if you take, 2 or 3 minutes to give a little bit of background on yourself and your story and kind of how that led to your business career, and then some of what you're doing today with Natural High and other things you're involved with.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Micah and Lloyd. So I came from a nuclear family, grew up pretty much in the late 60s, early 70s, was in a beach town called Coronado. My dad was at Princeton, and then he got his Navy scholarship to Princeton, so he served in the Navy as a SEAL. Got out of the SEAL program and went on to become a real estate guy. I was the oldest of three boys. My sister was 1 year older, so we had a family of four. Had a fairly normal upbringing. My parents were conservative, went to church twice a year. I met Jesus in high school through a Young Life program. There was a girl I had a crush on, and she invited me to a Bible study. And I really was attracted to the youth leader and the energy and just the peace and the joy that he had. And one thing led to another. I used to work part-time in a local restaurant, and one of the older guys in the restaurant, a waiter, took me under his wing, and I soon became a Christian late in high school. Had 4 or 5 prodigal moments, probably maybe 10 prodigal moments, actually, if I really am honest about it. But I eventually settled into a long faith with the Lord in college and thereafter.
What was it like growing up with a SEAL dad?
Well, he actually was a pretty cool dad. He didn't have any obvious vices. He didn't drink, in excess. He didn't smoke. He was like every morning he would wake up and do calisthenics, which was his name for it, back before TRX and the whole body weight workout thing was, but back then he thought like lifting weights with a bicep was a workout. And what Dad was doing was stupid, but he'd do these burpees every morning, and he'd do these pull-ups and these push-ups. And now when I work out, the last thing I want to do are burpees and push-ups and pull-ups, because that's like the hardest thing. So he had a very strong physical work ethic, like keeping his body in shape, always ate healthy. And he was a Princeton graduate and went on to get an MBA at Columbia. And he had a discipline in his work. He had a discipline in his approach to life. And that's the good of what I got out of growing up with my dad as a Navy SEAL. He would actually shower the three boys from the sound asleep to ready at the breakfast table. It took him about 8 minutes with three boys. So he'd come in and he'd say, "You got to get up, you got to get up, you got to get up in the morning." Dun, 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 dun. He'd do that whole thing. We'd be roused out of bed. He'd throw us in the shower. He'd turn it on. It wouldn't even be warm. It'd be cold, and he'd turn it off. He'd go lather. He'd turn it on, rinse, done. And he'd get all of us through the shower, like with soap still behind our ears and dried and at the table in about 8 or 9 minutes. So yeah, Dad was a character.
So how did you end up as a surfer with a Navy SEAL dad?
Well, he used to train me. He used to train me to go out to the far buoy on the biggest days. We had to work through the shore break and through the outside waves. And it just became very natural, obviously, growing up around the ocean.
So Jon, talk a little bit about after college, did you go straight kind of into the business world? What was your journey into business?
College, I was working part-time as a programmer. I studied computer science. I didn't really like that very much, but I got into sales. And sales was a lot of fun. I worked for a IBM reseller, they were called at the time, and that really captured my desire to be in a sales-driven business. I pivoted to the financial services industry. Long story short, I worked for a big firm, and then I started my own firm. I ended up getting involved in the alternative investment space, is what it's called nowadays. Really, it's like kind of hedge funds and private equity and derivatives. And I became basically an organization that helped high net worth investors find hedge funds and alternative investments. Built it up to 120, 130 people, based in La Jolla of all places, and we had high net worth clients all around the world. At the end of the run, we were doing business with Merrill Lynch and some of the biggest brokerage firms with our products. And I ended up selling that. In 2008, we happened to make a lot of money for our clients. In 2009, 2010, a Fortune 50 came and knocked on our door. And I had the blessing to be able to transition out of that business. It was a very hard business. I call it a grind. It was a full-on, emotional, intellectual, and even physical, because of the hours and the travel. But I was able to get off that train in time to watch my kids grow up, which was a real blessing.
Were you working intense hours during that season as you were growing your business?
I worked, 60, 70 hours. Arguably, I worked when I was at home. I was always distracted. We had at the time, we had several $1 billion at risk every day with different hedge fund managers around the world. But I was very fortunate to have some good mentors at the time. And along the way, I got the idea to hire people to do my travel. So we had the burden of going out and doing research on all these different managers all around the world, New York, London, wherever. And I hired an A team to do that footwork for me so I could spend more time with my kids. And that was, didn't realize at the time how important that was. But it really was this idea of hiring while I'm on the grind. Can I hire people to do this work and stay focused on my most important goals in life? And that worked out.
So were you, I've read some of it online, and so did you start, tell everybody a little bit of the history with your brothers and why you decided to start Natural High. Were you doing that coinciding with your career, or did you sell your business and then start doing that?
No, it was all at the same time. Life we don't have the luxury most of the time to time the struggles and the storms that come along the way in life. So I was the oldest of three boys. My brother Eric was 1 year younger. Steve was 2 years younger. They got involved in drugs pretty heavily in high school, part of the beach community of Southern Cal. And I was almost out of a sense of responsibility. I was trying to help my brothers make good decisions. I went to rehab meetings when I remember being a junior in high school and being in a rehab meeting with my little brother before anyone knew what that was. All of a sudden I'm in a circle. So it was concurrent with my high school years, my college years, and while I was building a business, my brothers, thank God, they accepted the Lord and they had deep faith. And a lot of people that struggle, I think, have real deep faith. And they ended up losing their battle to drug addiction. And I lost Eric. I lost Steve through a cocaine overdose. He died in the backseat of a cop car and left behind a little girl. And I lost Eric maybe 5 or 6 years later. He took his life after a long battle with addiction. So I founded Natural High. At the end of that journey of actually burying my second brother, I knew to the core of my being I had to do something. And I didn't have it all figured out. And I'm still figuring it out. It's a big issue. But I started Natural High, and God put it on my heart to do something. And I just started doing stuff and kind of checking back in with God. And it's grown into one of the, thank the Lord. I think the Lord prepares for us in advance good works for us to do. And out of that tragedy, God prepared for me in advance this amazing opportunity to reach young people. And we've been able to do that through Natural High. We now we have over 25,000 teachers on the program, and we're speaking to 6 to 8 million kids a year now in schools in all 50 states now.
That's amazing. Is it mainly through the schools? Is that what you are trying to do, is educate educators to do the program?
Yeah, we believe in the power of storytelling, and storytelling is, part of what you guys do at halftime. It's part of what we're doing right now. And Jesus knew the power of storytelling. I'm not very good at remembering verses, but I remember the stories. So we came up with this vision to tell stories through people that are influencers, and through those stories help kids make really good decisions. And I started doing those individually on stage at school assemblies, and I knew I couldn't scale that. So we decided to go digital. And originally it was VHS, and then it was CDs, and then it became the internet. So at the very beginning, we were sending out VHSs to tapes to schools. But then it went all digital, a dozen years back. And we don't compete for the phone with kids. We would love to, but I just think that's a very tough battle. And there's a lot of very smart people with a lot of money trying to capture the short attention span of kids. But we know they have to go to school. And in schools, you're not allowed to sit there and look at your phone in class. So we decided to capture their minds and tell stories while they're sitting in their seats in schools. And that was our big, kind of transformative strategy. One of the strategies we use at Natural High is to convince the teachers to use this program as an optional program in schools. And once the teachers started using the program, they loved it. We have thousands we have an army of teachers that are raving fans of Natural High. So now we interrupt the school day of kids from their typical class. We get to show them these really cool movies on screen and get the kids to talk story in classrooms.
And Jon, you're helping them find their natural high. So take us one level deeper.
Yeah,
I think what would the natural high be, and what are the kind of range of what kids, and how do they execute them?
Yeah, it's drug addiction is a severe. It's one of the top 3 ways we lose our kids. It's addiction and death. They're both arguably. Addiction is almost like watching your loved one die. There's alcohol related, drunk driving and what have you, and there's suicide. So those 3 are the way we lose our kids, and there's no real national program to combat addiction. So when I came at it, the idea was, Jesus doesn't scare us into salvation. I mean, maybe if, forgive me for saying this, there's some denominations I won't mention that really pound that really hard, but a real heartfelt, like, I want to do and be with this person, this God, this amazing Jesus. Not because he's going to kick my booty, but because he's going to love me with unconditional grace. And I'm going to be able to get through this messy life, broken and all, with this understanding that this God came into earth as a man and went before me and showed me how to do it. So I find people that have gone before kids and show them how to do it through the power of story. And some of these people aren't Christians, but they've made really healthy choices. We're all made in the image of God. So there's amazing storytellers and influencers out there that kids can relate to. And if you're going to tell kids not to do something, you got to push them towards something that's attractive. Like, I don't love Jesus because I don't want to go to hell. I love Jesus because he's amazing. And the more I find out about Jesus, I just want to hang out with him. And I think that's especially true with teenagers, right? The more you tell them not to do something, the more they're going to do it. One of the things we do at Natural High is we have a whole program for parents. And one of the things I've walked into lately is to pay attention how much interaction you have with your kid that's correction, admonition, punishment, rules. And I find myself all the time, when Van wakes up, hey, Van, have you done your homework? Are you good? Like, before I even say I love him, before I even check in. So the concept of natural high is like, there's a lot of science behind it. And if you go to our site, you can read about the science, but just in a sense of a common sense, when we do our natural highs, our brain releases the same dopamine it releases when you do drugs. It's not as much as what you do drugs, but it's natural and it's good. And we teach kids that concept. Like, you can get a natural high and it's insanely awesome. It's hugging a relative. It's, dare I say it, your first kiss. Is it, it's scoring a goal in soccer. It's doing well in a test. It's art, it's science, it's music, it's friends. You're creating a natural high. And once kids lock into that, and they lock into the fact that every kid is designed different, you have unique natural highs, and you go after your natural highs, then this idea of drug and alcohol abuse is just a ripoff, because it's going to rip you off of your natural highs. So it's a concept that I think we're wired toward. And when you articulate it to kids well, they go, oh, I get it, man. I get it. I'm going to do my natural high. I'm not going to do that rip off drugs and alcohol. So it's one of those layers of paint we put on a kid. I call prevention like painting layers on a barn in the prairie. No one paint works. It's a constant application of primer and paint and roof, and you don't want that barn to get weathered, and you want that barn to survive. That's like prevention. And natural high is probably, unconditional love. They call it in psychology positive regard, unconditional positive regard. And when you have that kind of relationship that, no matter whether you agree with that person or disagree, if you show unconditional positive regard, typically in a therapeutic session with a counselor, you get to that place of trust, and you get that place of understanding and knowing. And those are some of the concepts. I'm rambling a bit, but those are some of the concepts that we teach parents, is to show that you have unconditional positive regard for your child, no matter what the behavior is. And then you can teach them these lessons and layer on these lessons about getting your natural high in that environment, not as a corrective tool, but as a bridge.
And I love that it's so science rooted. It's both clinical and scientific, and it's practical, and yet it's rigorous. So that actually points to how you have learned to bring your best contribution and hire other people at Natural High, and in each of your ministry sort of platforms, to do what they can do and to stick with what you're really great at. So talk a little bit about that. What do you see as your unique contribution? And then how do you find great leaders that you offload the rest to?
That's a great question, Lloyd. I think that for me, as I think for many of us, I certainly fall prey to the tendency to dive too deep and get too wrapped up in the details and try to perfect, if you will, at the granular level. But that's not terribly effective. And for me, it became, what is my drumbeat? What is that? What is my drumbeat? What is that rhythm that thing I keep coming back to? Sometimes it's faint, sometimes it's strong. And I find that finding that drumbeat for me was the big picture about prevention. Like this big picture, like, what are we doing? We've got kids that are dying all around the country, and without getting too pulled into a lot of different rabbit trails, I should say, what could we do at a very fundamental level to change the culture? And that was where I felt God was really calling me toward, like yell it from the mountaintops. We need prevention. It's not well-meaning videos from DEA agents that are going to capture the minds of kids. Yell it from the mountaintops, and wake the parents up and wake the teachers up so we can wake the kids up. And that was it. I mean, I love kids, and I just did an all-school assembly last week. I don't do those very much anymore because of time, and I can relate to young people. But if I can get this program in classrooms around the country and not impose, but wake up the culture to this need that we have, that's my time best spent. So I hire really smart people. I have a lean staff. It's digital. Part of the beauty of what we have today is we can create digital platforms that can scale. And I have, a teacher calls me up and says, how do I sign up for Natural High? I just say, go to our site, and it's all there. Like, you don't even need me. Natural High can just run on its own. Every year, we just have to drop 2 new stories in. And a lot of these stories are what we call evergreen. Like, how long is Tony Hawk's story going to be cool? Probably a very long time. How long is Kelly Slater's story going to be cool? Or these Olympians that we have? Probably a very long time. So that's been the real gift. It's hard for me to pull back. It's hard for me to not hover over my team, but they love it when I have big ideas and give them the opportunity to execute on those big ideas. So
and take it to scale. So give Mike and I kind of the latest for-profit example of how the same purpose statement, same passion around substance abuse prevention for teens is playing out in a for-profit platform that you just uncovered. It was just hidden in plain view.
Oh, that's a good story. So I believe everybody has a wound or 2 or 3, but most people have a wound that defines them. And I think sometimes that wound becomes our purpose. And you think about Jesus and the woman at the well, or the rough fishermen that turned when they met Jesus. They all had wounds. And Jesus came in and helped heal those wounds. And for me, the wound, sometimes I think the wound for many people becomes a catalyst for purpose. So for me, the wound of losing my 2 brothers and the category of mental illness, one of my brothers was suffered from a severe depression and addiction. Mental health issues became part of my wound. Like, the Indians sit around the campfire and they show each other their wounds, and that elevates your stature among the tribe because it builds trust, and you're able to touch that wound and feel that wound. So for me, it was mental health and mental and addiction. So this was a filter that I had when I looked at business opportunities. When I sold my business, I had, some interesting business opportunities I pursued, but the ones that really stood out were the ones that were congruent with my wound and my life purpose. So, this guy came along that had a pretty interesting idea for helping K through 12 schools get mental health care for their kids. And 20 years ago, you wouldn't go to a school to get mental health care. Now it's required in many school districts that they provide mental health resources for kids in need, and they don't have the resources. So I met a young man that was very new in his business. He's a recovered alcoholic, which he will tell you, USC Marshall School of Business, had all this potential, but he had a spreadsheet and he had a little corner office above a liquor store in La Jolla. And I met him, and he had so much enthusiasm and so much passion over this idea through his recovery to get help for kids that it kind of matched my drumbeat. And I went, wow. I kept thinking about him, and he kept calling me. So I gave him some love money. And it turned out to be an amazing investment, but probably, or actually much more importantly, we're now in 11% of the schools in America. We're in every state, and we're helping millions of kids get mental health care. And the business is called Care Solace, Caresolace. You can look it up online. And now we're providing the same services to municipalities. And what it is, it's a simple software package that sits on top of a parent or teacher's desktop that helps them get care in their local community quickly. So a lot of kids need help. Schools can't provide it. Telehealth isn't necessarily the answer for most kids or many kids. And we put them in touch with the resources surrounding the schools. And so we're now 120, 130 employees, and we're now branching into municipalities. Where if you're on a city that has our service, you can go online or pick up the phone and describe your condition and what you're dealing with and get help. So that's a long answer, Lloyd, but it was very consistent with the drumbeat that God put on my heart that traces all the way back to the wound, and it traces all the way back to that time.
And one of the lessons in there is don't shy away from a for-profit opportunity that can take really effective resources and address you care most about in a scalable way, because it is for-profit, right?
And actually, because of the experiences I had been through, I was able to really help the for-profit. And bottom line, the for-profit is helping. The schools wouldn't take it seriously if it was a nonprofit, quite frankly. Like if we gave that service away to schools, I don't think they'd use it. Natural High, we have a way to get them to use it, but because they have no other competition. So yeah, it's really been a blessing. It's been obviously a blessing financially, but it's really been rewarding.
Thank you for listening to the 100X podcast. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast service. We would greatly appreciate it if you could rate the show and leave us a review. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor Investments, whose mission is to build America's most generous real estate company. To learn more, please visit anchorinv.com.